Willy, like a couple more questions. Like, first of all, I'm just gonna take a bit of a tangent here because in the past you had like two successful exits from different companies. I'd love to hear like how did those experiences translate to building Nounspace, and maybe how did you even approach Nounspace differently from the start compared to your other projects, and how are you approaching the entire challenge, like all the challenges differently or the same?
Yeah. Well, my first startup, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a very successful exit. We exited and we like just managed to pay back the investors. We actually got hit with a lawsuit right when things were really ramping up and picking up, which was very challenging and depressing, and but a great learning experience. And so we took a lot of those learnings from the first startup, and my second startup experience was a lot more successful. And we actually didn't raise any investor funding, and 6 months after having the idea and starting to build it, we were acquired by Shapeshift, which was like our favorite company in the space back in this is early 2018. Uh, and yeah, I think since then the space has changed quite a bit. So I'm very much a fan of like community ownership, and as opposed to going the traditional fundraising routes of venture capital, instead leveraging these new primitives that we have with token launches and with grant funding. There's also a large amount of grant funding available in the space, and it's great because you don't have to give up any equity for that. So um, yeah, we were initially funded by Nouns DAO, which was pretty exciting. Nouns actually really inspired the idea for Nounspace because they had a request for proposals where the community agreed that they wanted to fund 3 teams to build a Nounish forecaster client with 100K
Hmm.
each. And so that inspired the idea for Nounspace. We put the proposal up, and from in less than 2 weeks after having the idea, we had 100K of funding to start building it, which was really exciting. But also there's trade-offs. Like I've never ever had funding from day one to start building a startup, so that was really empowering. But at the same time, too, when you don't have funding, it forces you to be scrappy and creative. And yeah, we also like we had the expectation that it would be that if we delivered in the first 3 month sprint, that we'd be able to secure more funding from Nouns relatively easily, as like easier than any other fundraising avenue. And a lot changed just in that period. I think it's pretty hard to get a prop passed from Nouns DAO right now, and we actually put up 2 proposals, neither of which passed. We had like majority support for one of them, but we didn't have enough to pass the quorum. Um, and there's a number of reasons for that. The treasury is smaller, and we're funding more ideas than we're bringing in with revenue, even though it's harder to get a proposal passed right now. Now it's also transitioned to a Duna over the past 6 months. It's still kind of in this transition process. Um, and so it was not as easy as we expected. And we had spent the initial 100K by the time we had those proposals rejected. So we did have to get scrappy again and creative. Similarly with our token launch, like, just like we talked about earlier, you have this vision that things are going to go really well and you hope for the best. And then most of the time it doesn't go quite as well as you hope. Sometimes it goes even better, but that's rare. And so that's been a challenge, and it's been hard even just to like keep the community motivated, or and the team motivated to continue building and pushing. When we have a lot of great validation, a lot of great traction, like we have revenues, we have users, that's great, but it's still not enough. So yeah, it's it's been challenging for sure, and definitely learning using all the lessons that we've learned from those first startups and from our past experience to try and do better and try and make it work. But it's never easy. No matter how many times you've done it before, it's hard. But definitely, yeah, all the experience helps, and we're as long as there's hope. For me, it's always like as long as there's hope uh, for the next step, then we truly believe that we can make it work. That continues to motivate us to keep pushing. Um, but we'll see at some point, like if we try enough things and we can't make it pop off, we'll have to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out, is our time better spent starting from scratch and trying to solve a different problem? I hope it doesn't get to that point, but we got to be realistic and not, we're taking a shot on goal, which we understand is like even harder than just building a small tool that can solve a small problem. Like we want to change the world, which is both harder, but also can be more motivating. And there's definitely still hope. So we're still pushing.
Yeah, but on the other side is you have one huge asset, which is really the community backing you up. So even if in the case of a pivot or in the case of this or that, you have a community of people that have followed you along the journey, which oftentimes you don't really have in Web2 startups. So in this case, you have a community that can really help you and be supportive when you change to the when you either pivot or even if you continue down the same path. At least that's how I see it from my perspective, which is a massive advantage of Web3 and blockchain.
So true. And not only do we have the Nounspace community, which is awesome, but we also have the Nouns community, which is a really strong advantage. Like you said, it's a great asset to be able to tap into. And yeah, I think part of the hope is that with these additional communities that we can bring on board, it's no longer just entirely on Nounspace to onboard all the users, but each community that we can onboard then will onboard their own communities. And then those communities, some of those members will become members of the larger Nounspace community. Definitely the hope. And like you said, I think it's one of the strong levers and advantages that we have that we're still hoping to really tap into and get the most out of it. But for sure, it's a strong advantage that we have relative to Web2 companies. And I really believe that the future of community is the future of social is community owned. And that again, like is one of the strong levers that just a Web3 social network can pull. And we've seen Farcaster do that. Like Farcaster had the most growth when people heard that, oh, I can come over to Farcaster and I can post and I can earn money. I can earn DGen, which wasn't even like the governance token for Farcaster. It didn't actually represent any ownership or control of
Yeah.
Farcaster benefits, upside in Farcaster. But because Farcaster itself didn't have a token, people kind of used DGen as a proxy, in my opinion, for that. So um, it's hard to get that flywheel going. And to your point, like one of the best things a community can do for growth of its own community and for support of its product is to have a token where the number goes up. People get really excited about that. And on the flip side, if the number is not going up, it can be harder to keep the community motivated and engaged. So one thing we are thinking about is how can we enable these communities to truly own their version of Nounspace and actually make it like a revenue generating thing for them. And where you as a community member, just by using your community's platform, can actually generate value and revenue for your community that would otherwise go to like Twitter, something that doesn't benefit your community whatsoever.
No, in that sense, like, don't you think it's quite difficult to? Or first of all, I agree with what you're saying. I'm just talking about a different perspective, but in that case where the community members would use the platform and get rewarded, like get financially practically incentivized to use the platform, don't you think that attracts a lot of users that would be just there to farm, which kind of gets us back to the airdrop farming challenges that we had in the last cycle, which are not that present right now, or maybe I haven't seen them that much. But rather than actually allowing like helping communities build around the core centerpiece and then having the financial incentive more as a cherry on top, that's like, okay, here's some cash as well, thank you for using it.
It's a great point because like incentives are powerful. People, will act out of their self-interest. And so if you can align those incentives, like people will act that way, but they can also be very dangerous. And like we saw that with Farcaster where DGen attracted a lot of good users, but it also attracted a lot of farmers. And then that became a big challenge for them is like uh, controlling the spam. I think what we would like to do is enable the communities themselves to generate revenue so that you're not just like earning money for yourself just by using your community's platform, but you're generating revenue for your community that then the community can then allocate. And the community itself could then decide to put their own incentives on top of it. But instead of us trying to design that, we would enable the communities to basically put that in place if they wanted to. And instead, we would just focus on rewarding the communities for the revenue and the value that they generate for Nounspace. Uh, and similarly, like one pricing model that we're looking at for this, and it's all still tentative, but like a free version where it's a subdomain on Nounspace for your community that has some Nounspace branding, and then a premium version that's where the community can earn revenue. And in order to unlock that, they basically buy and stake space tokens to unlock that, so that each of these communities becomes owners in the Nounspace platform. Um, we think that's a good way to align the incentives and still leave the door open for communities to incentivize their members however they want, but leave that up to the communities if they even want to do that.
That makes excellent sense actually, especially like leaving the communities that room for exploration and like let them figure it out as well. Because some who knows, like someone might come up with like a amazing solution that we haven't seen until now.
Exactly. And that's one exciting thing too, is that like any problem that a community wants to solve, now they just have to deploy a mini app for that. And they can have that on Nounspace. And if any of these mini apps get traction and are useful, they're now available to all the other communities and users of Nounspace to leverage as well.
Awesome. Willy, thank you for sharing all these things. Like it's I really enjoyed our conversation. One last question, like is there anything else that maybe I should have asked you, but I forgot or I didn't ask you yet that you'd like to mention?
Well, yeah. One thing I'll touch on here too is that one challenge that we've identified is that Nounspace currently it's very nouns branded. And so that can cause confusion for like these tokens who love their noun space, but they're like, why do I want to link to like a noun space domain? Or even people who hear about noun space, but then they just assume that it's only for nouners and that if they're not a member of the nouns community, that noun
Hmm.
space is not for them. And so that's another challenge that we hope we can solve with this white labeling. And at the same time, we can also make noun space itself fully focused on the nouns community, which some members of nouners want. And so we think that can help the odds of our next proposal pass is pitching to the community members that want noun space to be fully nouns focused. We will give you that. And we will no longer have noun space trying to appeal to everybody. It'll just be fully concentrated on nouns. But there's also community members that, like us, don't want the potential of noun space to just be limited to the nouns community because that's just not enough users to make the platform sustainable. We'd have to keep coming back to nouns for funding, and we'd be fully dependent on them, and that's not very motivating for the team. To build competitive software, there needs to be that big goal, that big vision that can scale beyond just the nouns community. And so we hope that this kind of current direction is something that we can get the majority of nouners on board with, both those that want the nouns focused version and those that want the bigger vision and potential. So yeah, that's the final thing I'll add. Otherwise, I think you asked a bunch of great questions. I think we got a good overview. And so, yeah, now we just got to execute and fingers crossed that this time it works out.
Willy, it was an absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you for sharing all these insights, and I'm really excited to see where Now Space is headed next.
Thanks again for having us, Chris.